My favorite tea is genmaicha. It's green, it's rice. I really love it because it's also a great companion to have an existential crisis with over Avni Doshi's Burnt Sugar, the book that we're discussing today. Imagine this. You're a daughter living with your mother in India, but your mother has suddenly developed Alzheimer's. So of course you take all of your time off and you work on helping her because you love her and you completely devote yourself to her. Of course times can be hard when your loved ones don't recognize you, but you focus your breathing, you concentrate, and you say this: I would be lying if I said that my mother's misery has never given me pleasure. I know how much we all love reading about dysfunctional families. Does it feed into your superiority complex to know that your mother didn't sleep with a cult leader? Yeah. Human degeneration halts and sputters, but doesn't reverse. The book is written in first person from the point of view of the daughter who relates the facts like they are. It's as if we're in her head, but it's way more structured and way more methodical than the average person. It's too clinical and too detached to be personal, but at the same time it's too personal for us to be able to put ourselves away from the narrative. And by layering the facts this way, it really feels like as if we're present in the story that's happening. There is a strange mix of narration and actually flashbacks going back to her memories, and usually it would feel messy, this kind of structure where it goes back and forward, but because of the way that the story is layered and because of the style that it's written, you can really feel that there was careful plotting and there was careful planning behind the actual book itself. I could practically smell the fumes of the auto rickshaw she sat in through the phone, the dark smoke it pumped out, as though I was standing right next to her. For a moment I felt bad. It must be the worst kind of suffering, cognizance of one's own collapse, dependence of watching as things slip away. I went to the book today to highlight some of the quotes that I wanted to return to in this video, and then I realized that while I was quoting, I actually couldn't help but read ahead. When you start reading, you just can't stop. And sorry, not to pull out all this GCSE English on you, like how does the writer use language to convey meaning and to create effect, but this really is a book where you can feel that this is exactly what the author has done through meticulous care. There are people who struggle in answering that question on the English language exam paper, but I can say for a fact that if this book was there, they would have a field trip with it. There's just so much you can focus on. The way that the author first chooses the words, then she chooses the way that they fit together, then the overall meaning of the sentence, then the actual atmosphere it creates, then this like weird fact that you don't need to know but really adds to the story. Impassioned moment where she says how much she hates her mother and you really feel for them both. This combination of careful word choice, I felt like it reminded me a little bit of Convenience Store Woman, just by the style of being present and seeing things from above, but still being involved enough to take part in the story. It's a dark sort of feeling, and like I said, the layering that Avni Doshi does, the way that she puts it together, it's really unique. Of course there are books that remind me of this style, but specifically in the context of this story, in the context of this dysfunctional and toxic relationship, it's something new and it's a new lens for the reader to admire and to see the story through. And I noticed after I was reading a couple of other people's thoughts that they thought that the book was too descriptive, it was too gruesome, it was too stark. Why do we need this many descriptions of bodily fluids? But I think that's what adds to the allure of the book, really, this, I don't know what to call it, candor, I guess, with which Avni Doshi crafts her tale. Well, these are the things that we keep to ourselves, even though it's things that I guess everyone does. It's just things that you don't really talk about in like polite society. I mean, I'm guessing that most of the people watching this video don't have a mother with Alzheimer's. They probably don't hate her. She probably didn't go out with a cult leader at some point. But maybe, just maybe, you've cared for someone and you've had a thought where you were like, I'm so tired, I wish this would just stop, and then you immediately regretted it. And it's not even about caring for a person, I never had that, but just sometimes when you have these moments of spiteful thought that you're just angry or you're just tired and you wish it would all just stop, and then you immediately feel guilty because you love this person and because this person has done so much for you. But I guess even if you have these thoughts, what you usually do is you feel guilty about them, even if they're not so serious, even if it really is just a moment to spite, you feel guilty about it, and then the next instance you're like, okay, let's forget it and let's move on. And then even though you can't really forget it, the painful things always stay in your head. You just move on, even though it's always there. But here, you don't get that luxury. You can't move on. Even when it's not about the mother, it's about the mother. The way that the mother has treated the daughter, it permeates every single word of the story. And because you can't let it go, and because you have all these descriptions that you probably don't really want to hear, it makes it all the more painful to read and to be confronted with this like real humanity. It impressed me that she was such a liar. For a time, I wanted to emulate this quality. It seemed like the one useful trait she had. If someone said this in real life, people would throw hands. And I'm not talking about like this usual, oh, don't lie, kids. I'm talking about things that everyone wants to do sometimes and everyone does sometimes, but no one really says out loud. It digs in. So of course we all like know that lying is bad. It's just not something that we like to actively discuss. But here you have a character who sees her mother lie, and she sees her mother gets away with it, and that's what she wants to do, and she thinks that's an admirable quality. And it's just not something you usually hear characters say. The most extent of characters being like bad people is usually just murdering people, and like not to justify murder, right? But it's a different kind of feeling when there's something that's, you know, for a fact is wrong, and when there's something that's wrong but it's just not what you do in a sense. And just also this entire feeling of people all their lives being told like who you are is not related to your intrinsic self of worth, and then you see this daughter, once her mother is sick, immediately a sign that she's useless to society now. It's just something that people don't really want to read about. It's something that's painful, that's uncomfortable, and I guess that's why so many people found it really hard to read and so many people DNF'd it. It's not that you hate the characters, I mean maybe you do, they're not exactly the best people, but it's just that you can't be confronted with this honesty that you don't see in polite society, that you don't see in everyday life, that everyone thinks sometimes but no one says out loud because they don't want to be declared horrible people like the characters in this book. In the English language there's a phrase, airing out the dirty laundry. This book, I feel like, is such an embodiment of that phrase because it shows the main characters in her dialogue so well. She's the real human. She's the human that all of us are sometimes, but we just don't show it, you know? We all make mistakes. We all make errors. That's the quality that we like to describe ourselves by. Of course, we all say like, oh, she's such a kind person. Oh, she's such a smart person. Like, but at the same time, when someone makes a mistake, what we always say is you're human. You're going to make a mistake. Of course, that's what really helps us and defines us as human in these times. It helps us to say this, to realize that people make mistakes, and then to, well, learn from these mistakes, and then we move on. Yeah, like I said, you just don't always say what you think. Sometimes you think that you're better even when you know you've made a mistake. When you see someone yell at their sibling in public, even if you yell at your sibling all the time, even if you've yelled at them in public before, at this current moment you're not doing it, and you're thinking like, at least I don't yell at my sibling in public, is this tendency to compare yourself. And because we don't always say what we think, and because we have these thoughts that even if we recognize the errors of our ways, we would still like to think that we're better people than at least some people. This is why being confronted with the character describing how she sweats, every inch of her skin like sticking together, all you're thinking is, yo, this is horrible. I don't do that. But the thing is, we all sweat. It's just that no one would ever consider, at least who I know of, just going out in public and saying all this and describing it. It's because we're in her head. It's because we're in Antara's head that we get to see these thoughts. But at the same time, because of this whole detachment thing, it doesn't necessarily feel like we're in her head. So it's just this fine balance that Avni Doshi writes. And another thing is, you don't really see character growth, you see character development. Her lips cave in where 2 teeth are missing at the side of her mouth, and she looks like she has eaten something bitter. You see developments in terms of understanding what the character thinks, but just when you're thinking that you understand, your expectations are snapped in half. And the book has that very realistic quality of people doing something just because. Sometimes no explanation, no justification. Of course, we can speculate as to why someone did something, but we can never know for sure. And I think it's just very reminiscent of real life, because when you go around, you don't see someone do something and you're like, in chapter 1, this character did that. I think that's enough about the writing. The writing is a very personal thing, so if you don't like it, I can't just be like it, it's good. But it was the thing that helped me read the book more than I might have, even though all the other elements of this book are really good as well. The writing just played a really big role for me. I really admired it. Ma naps on the sofa, and for a moment I can imagine what she'll look like when she dies, when her face slackens and the air abandons her lungs. Feel uncomfortable to be so close to death yet? Final thing about the writing, I know I need to stop fangirling, but just, it's masterful foreshadowing. No spoilers, absolutely no spoilers. I don't want to ruin this book for anyone. I want you to go into this book and be like, this is amazing, yay! Can I just say that when I read the ending and then when I went back to look for the quotes, I saw so many things that I highlighted before, and I kind of saw it being reflected in the ending. So all these little elements really add together to make a story just like the characters, just like the plot and the amazing writing. It's easy to unravel when no one is watching. If you've already read the book, the ending, it's very open-ended. You can think what you want, but just these quotes, they can drive you towards one direction or towards another. And it's just really interesting to see what people think about it, because there's so many different interpretations this can take. Okay, and going back to the whole character development but not character growth, you only see things from the daughter's point of view. Of course, you can think about what the mother is thinking based on her actions, but there's not this moment where you feel like you're inside the mother's head. And I guess you're really impartial. Like, sure, you can support the daughter's opinion that the mother has done all these horrible things. And of course, there are monstrous times where I don't think anyone can disagree. How can you slap your 7-year-old child and just constantly insult them? But there are moments of tenderness between the mother and the daughter, and moments where you can see that they truly care about each other, even if it's in like specifically weird ways. And you can't really judge the mother at other times, I guess, because she's doing things for her own happiness. And it raises all these questions like, who are we living life for? Is it our responsibility that once you have a child, you have to raise it? Or do you have an excuse to act this way sometimes, as long as you return to your child and you can care for your child? And it's just these difficult moments. And I guess that even though you're impartial, you can never be fully impartial, because you're always involved in some way or another. And even if you don't necessarily agree with the Antara here or her mother Tara here, I think you can understand both sides. And that's maybe the beauty of this book. Not only the honesty, but the understanding. Not the agreement that you can reach, but just this feeling of understanding both sides and thinking about what you would have done if you were in that situation. Personally, what really helped for me, even though none of the characters were really, you didn't really get any deep Dostoevsky type insights into the minds of people, at least some clues as to how the author thinks that people's brains work. I think what helped was all of this was the fact that all of the characters had their own very distinct voices. Even the side characters who we meet just like at the very end of the book, they still had that quality where even if you're reading something, you can still recognize who's speaking, even if that person isn't named. Especially, for example, in Hazy Childhood Memories, you could still see that that was Tara, that was Antara, that was whoever else. No spoilers. I'm not good with names. I'll say this outright, not good with names at all. So seeing such a distinctive description of what every character is like, and also the entire dynamic between daughter and mother, the toxic relationship, the normal, whatever normal is in relationships at times. The author overall leaves a lot of room for you to think about what's happening. This was done really well, and I feel like it was a bit of a dangerous moment, because if it wasn't done well, this could have left gaping holes and made the dialogue less authentic and more stilted, a sort of testing and pushing the boundaries of each other. But it managed to accomplish this, testing and pushing the boundaries of both the characters and the reader, while allowing for the reader to have room for their own thoughts, for their own speculations, and why someone did this and why someone did that. We have this story where the influence of the past plays a role in the present on the things that you didn't think about before. I think it's great, especially in difficult moments for Antara in the present when she thinks back to the past. How can she take care of a mother who didn't care for her before? How can she care for her own newborn child? I also found it interesting how Antara's name is Antara. It sounds like Antara, it sounds like not Tara. What she's doing is she desperately doesn't want to be like her mother. But I think this is just my opinion. In the mysterious closing parts of the book, she actually becomes more like her mother than the entire time that she has spent being confronted with her mother in these difficult, like, close quarters situation. It's an interesting sort of progression that her character arc takes. I am grieving, but it's too early to bury the body. I'd like to end my review today just by saying that this isn't all about mother and daughter relationships, and of course it really pushes you to take a closer look at your own relationship with your mother. But of course, it's not only about these relationships, it's also about diseases like dementia. It's a lot to do with memory and how the influence continues to be confronting grief, repressing emotions. Burnt Sugar is truly a novel that you won't be able to forget. And at the beginning, of course, I was exaggerating a little bit by saying that I constantly have an existential crisis over it, but it is not a lie to say that I have been thinking about this a lot. Especially at times when I am with my own mother and we're having a discussion on some serious things. That's the moment when I'm brought back to this the most. Avni Doshi has created something that will truly stick. Beautiful writing, great characters, and just a carefully described setting. By this point, it's really unclear whether it's the setting complementing the characters who go through so much or the characters who complement the setting. For a brief moment of time, it will transport you to Pune in India, and even when you leave, I feel like you still have a piece of you that you have left behind in that moment, because it all just comes together in this amazing emotional book. Huge thanks for making it this far. I just want to dedicate a little bit of time to saying a huge thank you to Kieran. Impeccable taste as always, except for Never Let Me Go. Sorry, I can't like that book. I really recommend that you check out his reviews. I'll link it all in the description box. Kieran, thanks so much for recommending Burnt Sugar. I love the book. I recommend it to anyone who's watching the video. Hopefully you enjoyed the review. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week on Sunday.